started.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, this evening we do not have a supplementary agenda. However, just to note to council, we have two items that have been removed this evening. Item 16A, which is the retention and attraction of the early childhood educators, has been removed by administration and will return back to council when they have more information on that. And item 14C, which is the motion by Councillor Crew, the core grant program revision. Councillor Crew has asked to work with administration for some clarifying parts of that motion, so that will return at the next meeting. Because that report 14C has been removed, I have spoke with both people who have submitted the deputations for this evening, and they have agreed to forward those deputations on to the night when the notice of motion comes forward, so we won't be reading those this evening. The disclosure of pecuniary interest, we have one. It was Councillor Oche with regards to 17A, the Wallaceburg Transfer Station way bills. And so we have marked that. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we have no deputations and we'll move on to the consent agenda. The items this evening that have been pulled. Just get those up on the screen for you. There we go. Item 13A, we have a presentation by administration tonight, and Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kirkwood-White, Councillor Latimer would like to speak to that. Item 13D, Intrepid General Offer to Purchase. Councillor Kirkwood-White has a question. Item 14B, the Communication Satisfaction Survey, pulled by Councillor Thompson and Councillor Latimer. We have item 16C, the motion of Councillor Oche regarding the Chatham-Kent mask bylaw. We have Councillor Oche and Councillor Hall who would like to speak to that. Item 17A, Wallaceburg Transfer Station way bills. That's been pulled due to the conflict by Councillor Oche. Item 17B, the temporary student position in waste and recycling services area. Councillor Kirkwood-White has pulled that. And the last one is item 18C, the motion of Councillor Pinsino regarding COVID-19 testing for firefighters. It's Councillor Pinsino's notice of motion, and Councillor Hall and Sakachi have asked to pull that. Therefore, this evening to be voted on for the consent agenda are items 12A, 13B, C, D, item 14A, 15A, B, C, 16B, 17C, D, and 18A and B.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Wright, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
Moved as presented, Mayor Kenneth.
I'll second that, thank
I
Any questions?
I have a question. I'm not getting the screen coming up. I'm getting everything else, but I'm just getting Meredith Cadotte has started screening sharing, but I'm not getting any screen. Is there something I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing?
Mr. Mayor, we'll have Councillor Foss will have the IT reach out to you to see. When we put the motion up, please let me know if you can't get it. And if you can't, let me know how you vote and we'll record that in the minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, we'll put it to vote.
We're still waiting for 3 councillors, please. Councillor Foss, were you able to vote?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so we're just waiting for one more councillor then? We have 17 in. Okay, all votes are in, motion passes. So, Mr. Mayor, we're moving on to 13, Community Development. 13A is the Climate Change Action Plan Milestone 1 report. And we have a presentation from Gabriel Clark, Manager of Growth and Sustainability, and Huda Oda, the Engineering Technologist. Huda, just to let you know, we can see your presentation on the screen now. Huda, are you there?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I'm just trying to look where the mute button. Good evening, Council. Thank you very much. Judy, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Huda Oda, Engineering Technologist with Drainage, Asset and Waste Management, and I work on the corporate components of the Climate Change Action Plan. And I'm joined today with my colleague, Gabriel. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gabriel Clark, Manager of Growth and Sustainability with the municipality, and I work on the community-focused portions of this plan.
Thank you. So in our presentation today, we will have two parts for you. The first will be community-focused, and that Gabriel will take us through the community GHG inventory, an overview of the policy review, and the first community engagement. And then I'll go over the second part of the inventory, which focuses on the corporate GHG inventory. And that will provide a quick summary analysis and next steps. Gabriel, please go ahead.
Thank you, Huda. So as Huda mentioned, we're going to quickly touch on some of the highlights of the rather lengthy 76-page Milestone 1 report, along with next steps for the project. So I'll be focusing on the community-focused portions of the project. So as part of the Milestone 1 report, you will have likely noticed that there is a greenhouse gas emission inventory, both for the community and for the corporation. I'll talk about the community one for just a few seconds. The inventory year, the year that we conducted the inventory for was for 2019. And the sources that we surveyed as part of that inventory are now shown on the screen. And really the greenhouse gas emission inventory starts to show the amounts and the kinds of energy that are used in the community, which supports or provides information to support the climate change action planning process. So this slide provides a general summary of the results of that inventory, and it shows that the municipalities, as a community, the vast majority of our greenhouse gas emissions are associated with the energy that we use for transportation, so for moving goods and people, and for stationary energy, which is basically the energy that we use to heat and cool our residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings. A small portion of that comes from the waste that is generated in this community, and that makes up just about over 1 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions for the year of 2019. When we factor in the 85% of the housing stock that was built before 1990, along with the quickly evolving but still limited market for alternative transportation, this data starts to inform the kind of opportunities that might exist in our community to reduce energy consumption, reduce energy costs, reduce energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, and produce local benefits. The other part of the project, or the report that I thought would be worth bringing up in this presentation, was the provincial and federal policy review. So we looked at a number of climate change or environmental related plans that have been released by the federal and provincial government over the last few years. And really what we identified at the federal level is that over the last number of plans that they've released, they've allocated, I would suggest, significant amounts of funding for taking action at the local level on both the causes and impacts of climate change. So, there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for external funding that have presented themselves that we might take advantage of. At the provincial level, there is a recent development in terms of the provincial policy statement, which is the list of ingredients that municipalities must, should, or might include in their policy planning documents, such as the municipality's official plan. And the quote that I have there on the screen comes from the updated provincial policy statement from 2020 that has strengthened language with regards to integrating energy conservation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and preparing for the impacts of climate change as part of a municipality's policy planning framework. In terms of next steps or current work, we are finalizing the development of the community engagement, the first of 2 community engagements to plan or to inform the planning process. And this community engagement will help inform priorities and areas of interest that exist in the community. The 5 themes that are displayed on the screen are derived both from our energy consumption profile, as well as our local climate analysis that was included in a previous report that suggests that our climate has become wetter, wilder, and more extreme. Hotter, wetter, and wilder, and that those trends are projected to continue to do so into the future. And then finally, the natural environment is there, thanks to its ability to help address both the causes and impacts of climate change. So that community engagement will be launched in November, so this month. In terms of next steps, we'll be hosting that community engagement online during the months of November and December. And then early in the new year, we'll be working with Council to complete a community engagement based on a spectrum analysis format. So that'll be occurring in the new year. And that's really, I think, all I thought that I wanted to focus on. So I will turn it over to Huda, and happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. So in my part, Council, I'll present to you the corporate focus slides, and it'll provide you a high level of analysis of the 2019 corporate GHG emissions inventory. In this slide, I'd like to show an overall summary of the inventory. So we'll start with the energy consumption, which came to be nearly 500,000 gigajoules of energy used in 2019. The next item is the GHG emissions total, and that's in equivalence of carbon dioxide, and that came to be about 20,000 tons of that. So to put that number into context, that's 20,000 tons of carbon dioxide is the same amount of carbon that would be sequestered by more than 24,000 acres of forest in 1 year. That is also the same amount of carbon emitted by an average passenger vehicle traveling around the world more than 2,000 times. So, in the third component of that inventory is the cost of doing business, which is the financial expenditures related to the emissions reported here. And in 2019, Chatham-Kent spent $12.8 million in dollars for that. So, to put that figure into context, looking at the average Canadian municipality that has a population between 100 and 300,000 residents, that average Canadian municipality would pay $12 million per year on energy usage. And so clearly Chatham-Kent is on the higher end, especially given that our population is closer to that 100,000 mark as opposed to the higher one. In here, and as was submitted in the report to Council, the corporate GHG emissions inventory is divided under 6 categories, and these are the ones listed here. And there were 3 elements, again, that were examined: the energy consumed under each category, the GHG emissions under each category, and the financial expenditures. So the numbers I'm showing here are the percent contribution of each category under the different elements. And I'd like to highlight here that the buildings in the fleet category combined contribute to more than half of the inventory in each for both energy consumption, emissions, and cost. So these 2 categories are the ones that represent our largest opportunity and perhaps even the low-hanging fruit for saving on energy, saving on GHG emissions, and on taxpayer dollars. Taking a closer look at the building categories emissions shows the types of buildings where these opportunities lie. So here is a slide that shows 2 graphs. The one on the left compares Chatham-Kent's 2019 emissions as kilograms per meter squared of area, and that's in the dark blue, with the average Ontario municipality, which is in light blue. And the graph on the right shows the percent difference between the 2. So as we can see, there are a number of Chatham-Kent building types that have emitted higher emissions in 2019 than the counterpart Ontario average. But it's not all bad. Looking at the sector of Chatham-Kent, we see that our treatment plants are performing considerably well compared to the average municipal treatment plant. And these numbers are based on kilograms of carbon dioxide per megaliter of water treated or water flows through the system. And this can be attributed to the role of the centralized treatment systems in Chatham-Kent, given that a lot of our geography is rural, and also to the smart investments in progressive projects like the cogenerator at the Chatham Water Pollution Treatment Plant, which helps convert sludge from all of Chatham-Kent's wastewater treatment plants into heat and electricity. And that saves a lot on those things as opposed to purchasing them. And it is these types of projects that I'd like to argue as the way we should go forward in terms of implementing corporate climate action and realizing environmental and financial sustainability. So the goals of the corporate climate actions in the CCAP, which ultimately hopefully make adoption next year, is to reduce the energy consumed at municipal facilities, the related emissions, and the associated expenditures. But we want to make sure that while we do that, at the same time, we are increasing the operational and resource efficiency of these facilities, realizing higher return on investment, and ultimately providing taxpayers with long-term value. So as next steps, what we'll be doing for the corporate components in my division is looking at the GHG emissions over multiple years. And that would allow us to explore trends and model the GHG emissions on a business as usual and a low carbon emission scenario. And then that will inform the goal setting for GHG carbon emissions or reduction of emissions for the corporation. And the last bullet there is just an update that the first corporate engagement has been completed, and that focused on mitigation. The next corporate engagement is scheduled to be implemented in the new year, and that will be focusing on adaptation, more specifically on infrastructure vulnerability assessment. So with that, I'll thank you, Council, for your time and your attention, and Gabriel and I would be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
We got a few. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kirkwood-White, and Councillor Latimer all had questions. So I'll start with Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the report. An interesting read, all 76 pages of it. It was something I worked through over the weekend. I was curious and it's not across the board like you pointed out, but by and large, our buildings aren't as efficient as the Ontario average. What do you owe that to?
Different factors. I cannot say for sure, but things like the age of the equipment, not being able to retrofit as a whole or trying to piecemeal things that could play a large role into that. And I know that our buildings team do try and implement projects that include high efficiency of electricity usage. But the fact is that we do have a lot of buildings, and I cannot comment on the specific efficiency of each building. That would require a much more detailed analysis. But I'm not sure if Tim is here and would like to comment on that, given that Tom's area. Yeah, but that would be my answer, is that each building type would need further analysis for them to be able to see exactly where the issues are. But the age, the equipment, and the type of building, the use, and pretty much the monitoring of that spending. That is a big piece of the answer, is to make sure we cannot manage what we cannot monitor. So if we are not monitoring across the board where our emissions are or where their consumption is, then that is a big gap that we need to overcome.
Who is Thomas? If I could add, so we did some analysis, especially when we looked at the upgrades of the Civic Center. And just first of all, the average age of our buildings is over 50 years. And back in 2017, when we presented the business case for the Civic Center upgrade, we found that there'd be at least a 30% reduction in overall energy usage just by upgrading all the insulation, the lighting and so on. If you look around the Civic Center, we're still using fluorescent lighting. We are converting a number of our facilities to LED lighting, but there are just many, many opportunities within our buildings of that age to make significant improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. To follow up, and you touched on it ever so briefly, and not holding your fire, just on a high level, what are some of the things that you would see as quick, relatively inexpensive, and easy updates to, to try and bring our greenhouse gas emissions down?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, is this corporately or community-wise?
Surprised me both. I'm interested. It is a community initiative, obviously, but I think we kind of looked kind of with this report, corporately.
Okay, so I'll answer on the corporate side of things. Making sure all our lighting are LEDs, which we still have a surprising amount of lighting that is not LEDs. That would make a big difference, but that's generally considered a low-hanging fruit. But really, we need to be able to recommission our buildings, and what that means is auditing the energy usage of buildings and making sure that the equipment and the function of that building is up to the design of the building at the beginning. And through the years, things change. The way we do business change. Different equipments and different usages of buildings, again, change. But recommissioning a building can realize a large investment, return on investment. But again, these things cannot be done building by building. These things need to be a corporate-wide initiative, and it might be a big leap at the beginning, but we would be able to have a good database of what we have and work on the areas where we can realize the most benefits and reduce the most energy and related GHG emissions. I'll let Gabriel comment on the community side if there are anything you'd like to comment, Gabriel.
Thanks, Uda. I think on the community side, I'm going to suggest that there's opportunities and there's limitations. At this current point in time, with the quickly evolving but still limited role that lower carbon vehicle and transportation options can play, at least in terms of longer distance travel, there's certain emissions that are, call them quote unquote unavoidable. People have to get to work, things have to move from A to B, and until the cost of electric vehicles over their life cycle, at least, starts to become on par with conventional vehicles, I think we're going to see some progress, but the economic case might not necessarily be there. On the other hand, as I maybe mentioned a little bit too quickly earlier, about 85% of our buildings in or of our houses in Chatham-Kent were built before 1990. And so just based on that fact alone, it suggests that there's quite an opportunity that might exist to increase the energy efficiency of existing houses, and doing so in a way that saves people money. There's a number of potential ways that the municipality could support the increasing energy efficiency of existing housing, as well as energy efficiency for new development. But we'll be exploring that, the demand or the interest of those particular ways forward as part of the community engagement process, and then also exploring options that might be of interest for the community, for the government, for the municipal government to take. So we'll see.
All right, thank you. I will leave my questions there. I'm sure my counterparts have some they want to answer too. So thank you very much.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, I'd like to thank Gabriel and Huda for their extremely comprehensive information report. For me, it was an opportunity for ongoing professional development, as it is not my area of expertise by a long shot. I did, however, recently attend the 3-day Federation of Canadian Municipalities Sustainable Communities virtual conference, week before last. And I have a couple of observations just from listening to some of the workshops and webinars. Firstly, I've heard that municipalities who have been successful in this area are those who have acknowledged that climate change impacts all municipal departments, including public health and infrastructure and economic development and so on. And reading through the document that was provided, it appears as though we have a lot of work to do in updating our official plan and changing the report's references to no mention of climate change mitigation or adaptation. And given Huda's request for a temporary student position in waste and recycling, which we're going to be dealing with a little later on the agenda tonight, it's my sense that we could be under prioritizing and or under resourcing this important climate change work. And I'd just like to ask Gabriel and or Huda, firstly, what are the local benefits or the top 3 benefits, let's say, from a good climate change action plan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Gabriel, do you want to take a stab at the overall community-wide benefits, and then I can add anything that has to do with corporate?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through the Mayor. It's a good question. There's, I think, an issue of scale that comes into play when we're doing climate change action plans at the local level. Conceivably, the issue is, at a global level caused by increasing concentrations of greenhouse gas emissions. The climate change action planning framework is sort of built around this idea that, we do our inventories, which is what we're presenting you with today. We develop greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and then we identify actions to meet that objective. The challenge that I've been trying to sort of wrestle with over the last number of years since I've been involved in this work is reconciling the fact that there's a global issue and a global solution with the fact that we are a municipal government that has, I think, a responsibility to consider the local benefits of action. And so, when I think about what we can do with this climate change action plan, I think we have an opportunity to have a discussion about how we can sort of, quote unquote, leverage the climate narrative to explore these local benefits, and maybe achieve co-benefits related to greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, if we lower the cost of energy for businesses and for our residents, we're generating benefits for those folks in our community. If we find ways to reduce the risks and impacts associated with flooding, erosion, and other precipitation related issues, then we're producing local benefits here. And same thing with enhancing our ability to withstand, respond, and recover to things like extreme weather events, and things like Huda's touched on in terms of lowering the tax burden associated with delivering services on our tax base over the long term. So those are kind of the benefits that I can think of off the top of my head that I think are worth exploring in detail with council and the community as we move through this process. Huda?
Yeah, I'd just like to add corporately, well, first and foremost, we need to lead by example. If we want to implement initiatives within the community, we need to show our residents and our businesses and in our different sectors that we are walking the walk and talking the talk, as they say. So, but just to add again, is that not just to be a leader for no reason, but also me working on the corporate components of this plan. Yes, for sure, the ultimate goal is to make sure that we are joining the global effort in reducing GHG emissions and making sure that our temperature globally do not rise more than at the 1.5 degree. But also not doing this solely, but also making sure that there are co-benefits that are coinciding. And to some people may be surprising, but climate action does come with a lot of co-benefits including reducing costs and losing energy. The thing that I think we need to overcome as a corporation is the fact that we need to come face to face with the fact that we need to overcome some large barriers that we have just because of the way we do business traditionally, based on historic information or based on reactive action corporately. So we're fixing things that need to be fixed today as opposed to strategic planning. So there is a big leap that we need to take. And then from there, the benefits will be realized. And that's what Gabriel and I hope to show through this process and beyond the adoption of the plan, that we want to save taxpayer dollars while saving emissions and joining global effort on this huge issue. So, but I do really appreciate your comments, Councillor. Thank you.
I have a second question. While I understand that the Climate Change Action Plan and our Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole work are two separate initiatives, I know that the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority has undertaken a number of initiatives with volunteers from local service clubs, nonprofit organizations, and retired teachers, as a matter of fact, to do some shoreline plantings with tall grass species, tree plantings, and tree giveaways. What recommendations would you have for local residents who are listening in tonight who might wish to take some action as individuals to support a good climate change action plan?
I'll start with the answers. Thank you for the question, Councillor. That's both a simple and a complex question that warrants, I guess, a sophisticated answer to a certain extent. And I mean, I think anything that a resident can do to enhance quality of life in Chatham-Kent is worth pursuing. I guess that's the simple answer. And there's a lot of, co-benefits related to climate change, the environment, quality of life, livability, sense of place that can be derived by having an engaged citizenry in our community. There's a number of, concrete things like, switching to electric vehicles, undertaking activities to enhance, restore, and conserve the environment, making choices that are, or purchasing choices that are aligned with climate reduction or greenhouse gas emission reduction and resiliency objectives. These are all things that, and undertaking energy efficiency improvements on the buildings that we have. These are all things that people can do, but I say that recognizing that there's also, potentially some barriers that exist, and that's what we'd like to understand as part of this community engagement process is are there areas of interest that are that exist in different segments of the community that there are barriers to actualization, and if so, is there a role, recognizing that there's only certain things that we control as a municipal government, certain things that we influence, and a whole bunch of things that we don't control or influence. Is there a way that the municipality can maybe potentially start to address some of those barriers? Maybe it's through education and awareness and outreach and working with our, collaboratively with our partners and our civic organizations. Maybe it's through incentives and encouraging, certain actions and ways forward. It sort of remains to be seen what the right list of ingredients is for our community, but hopefully that starts to paint a picture of why we see value in this particular process and what folks can do to make Chatham-Kent a great place to live, work, and raise our families.
Don, you had a further comment regarding Councillor Kirkwood-White's question?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a reminder to people listening this evening is that on our website, we do have our strategic plan, and under the environmental sustainability piece, there's a whole bunch of direct and fairly straightforward suggestions as to how our residents can do their part. It's under your part. And there's lots of things that people can do to get involved and to make a difference and move along incrementally. A shout out that there's also a number of other initiatives. One of our coworkers is doing a lot of leadership for the Relief Chatham-Kent Mike Smith campaign. So I think there's some great stuff happening. If people want to get involved, please check out our website. If you're interested, contact the people here at the office. We'd be happy to put you in touch with others that are really interested in making a difference. But we're anxious to hear about people initiatives so we can share those with others and we can update our website. But there's an easy place to look. Thank you.
Thanks for adding that, Don, and thanks to Gabriel and Huda for your responses. Appreciate it.
Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you to the Mayor. Gabriel and Huda, thank you very, very much for this report. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Kirkwood-White in particular commented and asked, commented on the issues and asked the questions that I wanted to ask. But I do want to add to Dawn that every effort counts in the interim. And I had the opportunity to take part in an FCM climate action change planning, some education series. And the one thing I took away from it, or I took away several things, but the main thing I took away is that council does need to lead by example. Huda has it right. And while I'm looking forward to the results of the community engagement and the council engagement and the opportunities list to come up in the prioritization and the goals to actually be formalized, I think in the interim, before we can formalize it, all of council has to remember that when we are planning or decision making, and when we receive a report from our municipal department managers, we need to ask ourselves, how is this decision or plan or report or recommendation helping us work toward meeting our climate change action, community and or corporate goals? And that was the one takeaway that was repeated over and over in this education series. And it will happen. It will take time because as Huda and Gabriel have both elaborated on, the answers to all of this sometimes seem so simple, but they actually are not. There are several barriers, and it's societal, it's personal, it's just the systemic. But until then, I think each of us can do our part to think about this and internalize it as we make our decisions going forward. So thank you again, Huda and Gabriel. Really looking forward to the community engagement part of this.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I did lower my hand at this point. My comments and questions would be redundant, so I'm okay with all the comments and questions that have been made. Thank you.
Perfect. We'll move on to the next item.
13E, Intrepid General offer to purchase.
Councillor Kirkwood-White and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, you had a question or comment?
I just had a very brief question for Gord Quinton. With this particular sale, where does our unfunded liability now stand for the Bloomfield Business Park?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer. I would say approximately $7.5 million remains unfunded for that. For the project, the expansions this year of the road networks to facilitate some more growth that's happening there, I believe was funded through the capital budget, so it didn't add to the to what's owing there. So approximately $7.5 million.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 18-0.
Move on to item 14, Chief Administrative Office.
14B, Community Satisfaction Survey.
We had a couple questions of that from Councillor Thompson and then followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you very much. I guess my first question would be, we recently did something with the KPMG that was, to my mind, fairly similar. I was just wondering how this is going to be different than community engagement we've done in the past.
Councillor Thompson, it's Don Shropshire speaking. I'll start. The major difference is this is a completely randomized survey. So Ipsos will be calling approximately 500 of our local residents that are over the age of 18. So they can draw from the responses a statistically significant inference as to what our overall population, how they believe we're doing. Most of our other community engagement tools that we've done to date, things like our website tools and some of the public meetings we've had, the people that go to those events are self-selecting because they've got specific interests in each of those areas. And there is a greater possibility in those situations, although we'll collect qualitative and good feedback, it can be biased. And this is an opportunity to get an unbiased sampling of across Chatham-Kent as to how our residents and taxpayers believe we're doing in terms of providing services and the value of those services.
So what kind of questions are we going to be asking?
So I'm happy to share with all members of council in the post the questions. Ipsos has, there's approximately 20 standardized questions. They ask the person answering what services they're pleased with, where they have concerns. There's questions about value for money. There's also some demographic data that also can allow us to profile the scope of people that we're actually surveying. I'm not sure if Councillor Harrigan had a question or a comment related to that or not. She's been involved in some of the work in preparing the study as well.
And this isn't something we can complete through our Let's Talk Chatham-Kent?
For the reason I mentioned, this is an independent, unbiased source of information. The recommendation is that we would do this at least once per term of council. And the fact that we have a group of people that is not municipal volunteers or staff that are stepping up and asking those questions, professional people that are responsible for doing surveys and compiling the results, it will give our members of council, administration, and our residents information that we've not collected to date. So that was the reason we went in that direction. This has been to council previously in terms of the scope, and it was included as one of our strategic priorities when we were looking at measuring our overall satisfaction of our residents. And it was another tool that I think was considered important and part of the community engagement piece. We want to make sure that we had unbiased information that could provide us with some insight as to where we had to improve or where we had to express greater effort, or indeed what we could celebrate.
And Councillor Harrigan, did you have anything to add to that? You're on mute, Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I just wanted to briefly weigh in as one of the co-chairs of the CK 2035 committee and just share that this report is really, and this initiative is really viewed as being in alignment with Councillor's community engagement priorities, in particular, looking at that engagement strategy for the corporation. We as a committee have talked numerous times about when there is something posted on the Let's Talk CK website or other attempts at the municipality to get feedback. It's often people with very high levels of interest involved in this feedback, whereas this survey is, a randomized survey that's leveraging expertise in area people who are experts at giving that survey. So we can get a baseline understanding of the service that the municipality is currently providing with regards to community engagement and community satisfaction. And from there, we will be able to then measure if the engagement efforts and the engagement strategy we're putting forward is markedly improving our residents and community members' perceptions of how how much engagement we are, what the right level is. It's something that our committee has talked about extensively, and certainly our committee members did see significant value in going out to market for this type of survey rather than having a staff administered survey.
Okay, my final question would be, have we ever done anything like this in the past?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I'd have to defer to Councillor Falls or Councillor Solomon for our corporate history, but I'm not aware that we've ever done it in the past. And as I said, I think the intent is that we would do this, once per term of council, but some of the tools that Councillor Harrigan talked about would allow us to do interim measures. So we might go back every 2 years and, do a check-in, but then we'd have the data from the unbiased random sample survey to compare it to as a baseline. So we can get some additional insight.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Latimer.
Well, my questions were asked and answered, but I have another one. After we get this information, is there any chance we could put it on Let's Talk Chatham-Kent or on our website to get some feedback from our usuals and people who just happen on it with regard to whether or not they agree or they don't agree? Because I got a couple of calls over the weekend, maybe Councillor Thompson did too, with people asking why we have to spend money on a survey for them to tell us the same thing we already know. And that was quote unquote. So I'm understanding. I think I'm in agreement. Yes, you are going to get more of a random survey, but I wonder if we could get some support, or if we could garner somehow or measure somehow whether or not that random survey actually gave us what the majority of our residents think and feel.
So the quick answer from my mind, there's nothing going to be secret about it. Our taxpayers paid for it, and the information could certainly be shared. I think the other opportunity to share the information is to bring a report back to council, highlighting what the results were, and encourage our residents to also be engaged in that process. So I think both of those is an opportunity for us to engage with our citizens and get their feedback.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Finn.
Just one quick question that got asked to me. I'm sure I know the answer already. Will they be calling 500 residents no matter if they complete the survey, or are they calling until they get 500 complete surveys?
So my understanding is that they'll have at least 500 completed surveys. And if they don't get a resident on the first call, they would try again. And then I can't recall with certainty the number of times that they actually call, but they go back to that same person several times in order to make sure that it's, again, you're not introducing a bias for people that don't want to pick up their phone. Okay. But I believe it's we've got a guarantee of at least 500 respondents, not just 500 names.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 16, Community Human Services.
16C, motion by Councillor Oche regarding Chatham-Kent mask bylaw.
Councillor Oche.
Yes, thank you. I'm Councillor Oche. Am moving that Chatham-Kent Council amend bylaw 101-2020 to add a new section 10 that provides that the bylaw expires at the time of the provincial government removes the mandate for masks in public spaces.
Can I get a seconder for that? And then I'll go back to you, Councillor Oche.
I can second that, Your Worship.
All right, Councillor Pinsino seconds it. All right, Councillor Oche, any comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes. I'm just bringing this in so that when the provincial government does remove the mandates for masks, we're able to not have to wait to remove it ourselves. And the reason I pulled it is I did not want people to think that because of this ending, like if it was to end, if I would have had it end tonight, that they think they can go through Chatham-Kent without a mask, because obviously the provincial mandate is takes precedence over ours. But it's just for in the future when the provincial government does remove the mandate for masks, that it is removed here as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Yeah, just I think Councillor Oche touched on it too. I think the way the notice of motion was originally written, it definitely caused some confusion in the community. I know some folks thought that we were voting tonight to, so that people don't have to wear masks anymore in places that are required. But obviously that's not the case. But I'm just wondering, my question is to Dr. Colby, if he's on the line, or maybe to April. Does this motion, I guess, does this make sense to move forward with at this time? Thank you.
Through your worship, the Chatham-Kent bylaw 101-2020 is certainly redundant with regard to the provincial masking rules and regulations that are enforced by legislation now. So I'm not sure that there is any significant effect of removing this from a practical point of view, as long as the public does not misunderstand what the intention of removing it is. So I don't know if that answers your question. We might want to hear from our legal counsel on this as well. But the Chatham-Kent mask law is, with all respect, not as well written as the provincial one. And I don't see any real reason to have both of them enforced at the same time, with the proviso that we don't want to mislead the public in terms of what's going on. And certainly I'm able to enforce a bylaw. I retract that. I misspoke. I'm able to enforce a rule for masking should that become necessary for any reason in Chatham-Kent through the powers that I have as the medical officer of health. Thank you.
That's great, Dr. Colby. Thank you.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. And actually, I think Dr. Colby answered a lot of my questions. I think even with this just on our agenda this time around has caused some confusion. I've been reached out to in asking the difference, sorry, dogs at my feet fighting, asking about the implications of this motion. I don't feel the need to support it at this point of time. And actually, Dr. Colby has clarified that the provincial mandate oversees what we have in here. So I'm seeing it as redundant. So thank you at this point of time.
Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mary Kenneth. I'll support the motion in that, although maybe it is redundant in that the provincial legislation obviously supersedes the municipal legislation on this front. But what I do recall when the bylaw was passed, there was some concern mentioned by some councillors and by some in the public that there was no expiry to the bylaw. So this, I think, fulfills that gap that we had, an unintentional gap at the time. There was a little urgency at that moment for masking, etc. Not that everybody agreed with it, but I think this does, basically put like an end date on the municipal bylaw. So I'll support it. I think it's a good idea. It just it cleans it up. It's more of a housekeeping kind of thing, but for what it is, maybe it's not terribly, effective in its purpose, but I think it does sort of clean it up. And yeah, I'll support it. I think it's a good way to put an expiry date on our bylaw and get it off the books when necessary. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-5.
Move on to item 16, or item 17, infrastructure and engineering services.
17A, Wallaceburg Transfer Station way bills.
Councillor Hall and Councillor C. McGregor, can I get you to move this, please?
Yes, so moved, Mayor Caniff.
Happy to second.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to the vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-0. Moving on to 17B, temporary student position in waste and recycling services area.
Councillor Kirkwood White and Councillor Crew, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved.
I'll second that, Mayor Caniff. It's Councillor Latimer.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Latimer. The Councillor Kirkwood White, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted, given the fact that I mentioned earlier on in the meeting about the under-resourcing of the work in climate change, and I know that HUDA has responsibilities in both areas of waste and recycling and climate change. I'm just wondering, HUDA, is an 8-month contract person going to be enough for you to be able to complete everything by the June deadline that you're working on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. This will take care of the most immediate backlog of tasks that needs to be completed, really aiming to make sure that we are, as a team between planning and IES, are meeting the deadline for presenting the final CCAP to Council in June.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Just waiting for one more, Council. All votes are in and motion passes.
Move on to item 18, corporate services.
18C, motion by Councillor Pinsino regarding COVID-19 testing for firefighters.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Steve Pinsino moved that whereas Chatham-Kent firefighters are required to perform tiered medical response as part of their job description, and whereas Chatham-Kent paramedics are funded to cover costs of their COVID testing for employees who are not getting vaccinated, and whereas the Ford government has announced a plan to lift the COVID restrictions as soon as January 17th, 2022, be it resolved that Chatham-Kent cover the costs of the COVID testings for firefighters through the Safe Restart Fund from the provincial government, if allowed, or any appropriate reserve that administration suggests. And if I get a seconder, I got some comments.
Councillor Wright.
I'll second that. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Okay, Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. Volunteer firefighters are not in it for the money. You can make a lot more money in a lot easier ways. They choose to serve their communities. Tiered medical response was brought into the fire department to ease the burden on the EMS. We're such a vast area, 2,300 square kilometers, that our EMS just can't handle every square foot of it in a timely fashion, and that's why they have the firefighters doing the tiered response. The average firefighter, excluding captains and the chief and deputy chiefs for the stations, makes somewhere around $5,000, give or take $500 a year. And they're expected to pay $45 2 or 3 times a week in order to fight fires. Like, honestly, this is a kick in the teeth. There's 18 volunteer firefighters out of 284 that chose not to vaccinate. That's their choice not to, but we're pulling them out of the tiered medical response part. And I would say the majority of those are into two departments. So it is affecting those departments. I don't see this as a lot of money. I see the EMS system gets their testing paid for. And I honestly believe that due to the fact that they're doing the tiered medical response too, that it should be covered. I would appreciate support on this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a couple of questions. First to Marianne Fenton, I believe she'll be handling this question. Can you explain how Councillor Pinsonneau's motion relates to the recently implemented vaccine policies for staff, and what impact do you feel this motion would have as a result? And then my second question is to Gord Quinton, and just wondering, Gord, if you can answer whether we know already if this testing would qualify for safe restart funding from the province. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Marianne Fenton. I'm currently the acting CHRO with Chatham-Kent. On October 1st, we implemented a vaccination verification and testing policy for 1,400 of our employees and volunteers. This includes the volunteer firefighters. That policy encourages vaccination, but it does allow testing for those choosing not to vaccinate. And the policy outlines that that is to be on their own time and that testing is to be at their own cost. This motion would mean that the volunteers in fire are handled differently than other employees and volunteers in scope for this policy. As well, we did also use that policy model when we went on to implement the next policy related to members of council and those appointed to committees of council. So implementing this motion would mean that the policy had been designed to be fair across the organization. So this would mean that one division in our organization is given this preference to be able to have their testing paid for where the rest don't. Right now, it appears that about half of the employees across the organization who are choosing not to vaccinate and instead are testing, half of them are in fire at this time. The other piece is we do have some of those other people who have chosen not to vaccinate. Some of them are students, some of them are casual, call in, some of them are part-time, also working close to minimum wage. So that would be the main issue that we would want council to consider as you are making this decision.
Thanks for that, Marianne. And Gord, could you answer the next question about the safe restart funding? Do we know if that would be if this testing would be covered under that?
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. It's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer speaking. So I have a vague answer, but the vague answer is on purpose. The grant, the Safe Restart grant for the general funds is a very vague grant. It basically states that it's there to offset municipal costs or revenue losses with respect to COVID-19. So under the current policy, testing is not a municipal cost, it's an employee cost. That's how it was defined in the policy. But by passing the motion tonight, would technically council is deeming it to be a municipal cost, so then it likely would qualify. I don't personally believe it perhaps is the province intent to pay for testing, but I don't expect that there's any way they could object to it either. So I know that's very vague, but the general answer is yes, I think it can qualify under the vague guidelines given by the province. But the second point, and that's alluded to in the recommendation, is that currently we have Safe Restart funding in place for 2021. At this point in time, the province has not given an indication that we're able to bring back any surplus funds, bring forward any surplus funds from that grant to 2022. So so as of January 1st, 2022, if this was to be approved, we would likely not have the grant to pick up the cost. And then, so I would suggest the strategic development reserve would be where we would have to take the funds from 2022 and take from that reserve to fund it as long as the testing was required.
Excellent. Thanks, Gord. And thanks again to Marianne for her response as well. Thanks, Mayor Kenneth.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. One quick question to Mr. Quinton as well. Maybe he might not know this, but the EMS, the allocation of funds for the EMS testing, where does that come from?
Thank you. So, Chief Case, correct me if you have any other information, but I think the province directly has funded the testing kits for many of the agencies under the Ministry of Health funding. So at hospitals and EMSs, I believe it's all coming through the Ministry of Health. That's not available for a municipal fire department.
So the current funding that they're receiving is completely different than the funding that we would be. And I guess to Marianne Fenton, Marianne, did you foresee an end to this policy, or do you feel that basically as long as COVID is going to be around, that this policy is going to be in place, so it could be in place for a very long time? Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We'll be keeping this policy in place as long as we feel that it's needed to ensure safety in the workplace. That's the main reason for the policy. So as long as we feel that COVID-19 continues to be a hazard to our employees, I suspect that our executive management team will want that still in place. Also, of course, we have to leave it in place as long as the provincial guidelines indicate workplaces should have these kinds of policies, and or Dr. Colby wants local workplaces to have these kinds of things. So I do anticipate, I mean, none of us know when the end of COVID is coming, but we don't anticipate that this is a short-term solution. We've put this in place knowing that it may need to be in place for some time.
Thank you, Marianne. And last clarification is required maybe to Councillor Pincenot. How I'm reading the motion on in front of me now, it says that Chatham-Kent cover the cost of COVID testing for firefighters through the Safe Restart Fund. And then Councillor Pincenot made a note that it was for the volunteer firefighters. So this motion here is just for the volunteer firefighters. Is that correct?
No, through you, Your Worship. No, that's for every firefighter. There's two full-time firefighters that are not vaccinated.
Well, thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. Point of order question. Seeing how we dealt with this, should this not require a 2/3 vote to be put back on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Judy. No, we didn't vote on covering the testing of firefighters. We had a policy, so this would be an original motion, not requiring a reconsideration.
But the original motion indicated that volunteers would have to pay for their testing, right?
Councillor Foss, the staff policy was not approved by council.
But the council and volunteer one was, and the firefighters are volunteers, so the volunteer part of it, I guess, I don't know.
The firefighters are covered under the employee vaccination policy, though.
Okay. I want to thank Marianne for her comments. Those were some of the concerns I've had, and I kind of support her rationale on that. So thank you.
Councillor Pincenot, any final thoughts before we go to vote?
No, Your Worship, I think I've covered it all. Thank you.
With that, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion fails 4 to 14.
All right, we'll go to notices of motion. We have 3 of them, Councillor McGrail, Councillor Sakachi, and I have one as well. Councillor McGrail.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Canna. So this is kind of a long one, so bear with me, please. I, Councillor Jamie McGrail, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the November 22nd, 2021 council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas broadband has become an essential service that is necessary to encourage economic growth and stability, modernize and streamline the delivery of health and social services, provide greater educational opportunities, increase capacity to administer and govern institutions, improve the environment, and create fairness and opportunity for everyone. And whereas the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, WOWC, represents 15 upper and single tier municipalities in Southwestern Ontario with more than 3 million residents, and recognizes that universal access to high-speed broadband connectivity is fundamental to the continued relevance and future prosperity of small urban rural communities in Southwestern Ontario. And whereas WOWC's desired outcome would see the province of Ontario's accelerated high-speed internet program maximize the amount of fiber deployed with the funds available, provide a level playing field that allows high participation of local and regional internet service providers, and ensure equitability of funding and outcomes between all municipalities in Southwestern Ontario, lower and upper tier. And whereas Infrastructure Ontario released RFQ number 21-048, requests for qualifications for accelerated high-speed internet program on September 9th, 2021. And whereas SWIFT is not seeking any further funding, and whereas SWIFT and WOWC support the province of Ontario's program and want it to be as effective as possible. And whereas the WOWC passed a similar resolution at its meeting on October 22nd, 2021, and encourages the 15-member municipalities of the WOWC to complete and forward their own resolutions to the Minister of Infrastructure. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor send a letter to the Minister of Infrastructure, the Honorable Kinga Surma, copying the Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Doug Ford, and MPPs of Southwestern Ontario, recommending that Infrastructure Ontario pause the procurement process until the following recommendations have been addressed. Number 1, lot sizes are reduced to an average reserve price of 10 million, with no single lot having a reserve price greater than 20 million. Wired and wireless designations are removed from the lots in line with Infrastructure Ontario's amendment to allow hybrid bids in all lots. Reserved prices are recalculated for all lots and are based on hybrid solutions rather than wired or wireless solutions. A clear, transparent formula for evaluating proposals that balance bid price with high fiber content bids is created and communicated to participants. The request for proposals, when issued, be made visible to the public, given that it contains no proprietary internet service provider information, ISP information. Immediately release the lot maps to all municipalities in Ontario so they can review and comment. Ensure that small ISPs in Southwestern Ontario are consulted directly and their input is considered. The details of the procurement to be reevaluated, and IO consider the following changes. Allow for progress payments to the recipients rather than holding 100% of the funding till customers are in service. Eliminate the bid bond requirements. Seriously reconsider the position that the Construction Act applies. Eliminate the bonding requirements called for by the Act, especially if no progress payments are being made. Eliminate the plan to hold back the final 10% and pay 100% of the project cost by the time the project is complete. Ensure that broadband availability data used to define funding areas reflects current realities so that communities and premises that are already served by target service speeds are excluded from funding. And the last one is provide an accessible and transparent process for service providers to demonstrate that they have already provided service at target service speeds in the auction lots. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor McGrail. Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and through your worship, I, Councillor Anthony Scotchy, here provide notice that I'll be bringing the following motion at the November 22nd, 2021 meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas there is currently a shortage of affordable housing throughout Chatham-Kent, and where there is a special meeting of council on December 20th to discuss homeless and affordable housing, be it resolved that administration include options to use potential upper level grants, municipal reserves, and potential issuing debentures to finance more affordable housing units in Chatham-Kent. In addition, administration to also review utilizing current and future municipal assets, such as land and or buildings, to develop affordable housing options prior to divestment decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Scotchy. I have one as well. I, Mayor Darren Caniff, will bring forward the following motion at the November 22nd, 2021 council meeting for discussion voting. Whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent is home to the Delaware Nation and neighbors with Walpole Island First Nations, whereas several communities in Ontario have installed Indigenous Seven Feathers crosswalks, whereas true reconciliation requires ongoing action from all levels of government. Therefore, as a way to commemorate the Indigenous children who were taken from their families and forced to attend residential schools, I ask that partnership development bring back an information report on installing a special crosswalk as a step towards reconciliation in our community. The report should include costs, possible locations, and partnership opportunities to cover the cost of the installation and maintenance. Thank you. We'll move on to approval of communication items. Councillor Latimer, you want to talk about both of them. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to pull two resolutions from 3A and B. The first was a resolution from Huron County with regard to requesting the province of Ontario and the government of Canada provide further financial support for housing and homelessness programs, as well as increased funding to mental health and addiction services. I think we should be supporting that, viewing our current issues in our community. And also the B resolution from Kitchener with regard to vaccine passport program execution cost assistance. And they also had a resolution with regard to renovictions data and the impacts of renoviction on Ontario tenancy. Both of these issues are current for our small businesses for the vaccine passports, and certainly renoviction on tenancy in Chatham has been an issue. So I wondered if council could support those resolutions.
Okay, can I get a seconder for that, please? For both those?
So moved.
Actually, three.
All right, sorry, three. I did see Councillor Harrigan's hand first, so Councillor Harrigan will second it. Anyone oppose? Any questions first? Seeing no questions, anyone opposed to this motion? Seeing none, we'll take care of that.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go into the first and second reading of the bylaws. Councillor Solomon and Councillor Pinsino, can I each move this, please?
I can move it, Your Worship.
And I can second it. We'll do it in reverse this time.
All right, Councillor Solomon, Councillor Pinsino, anyone opposed? Motion carries. The third and final reading, Councillor Foss and Councillor Oche. Can I get you to move that, please?
Also moved.
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Okay, resolution of council in closed session and adjournment. Councillor C. McGregor, and I'll get Councillor Bondi to wrap it up tonight.
Oh, point of order, Mayor. Were we doing non-agenda?
Yes, it wasn't on my agenda here. So yes, we'll step back one and do non-agenda. Thank you for pointing that out. Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Oche.
Thanks, Mayor Ken. If I wouldn't have asked if I didn't have just a quick non-agenda to bring up. As many are aware, the community of Wheatley Active Citizens Group hosted a community information session where we were able to get some really great updates from the province and hear from municipal leadership around some of the concerns and get some feedback around some of the next steps that are taking place within the community. One of the larger concerns, and this is where I'm just looking maybe for some clarity through Don, was around security. So, you know, concerns about looting, concerns about people sneaking into the evacuated zone in the evenings and then taking people's possessions. And certainly that's a concern held by both business owners and community members. I recognize that there's currently security services that are in place, but wondering if that is a conversation we need to have with CK Police Services, or if it's something council can get more directly involved in providing additional support, or certainly more police presence in the community, so that the possessions that people have, though they're not able to access them, can remain protected during evacuation.
Thank you. Through the chair, administration has heard exactly the same concerns that Councillor Harrigan has shared, not just with the meeting that we had last week, but it was certainly raised by a number of people at the meeting on last Wednesday night, but it's been raised over the past 5 days as well. Each and every one of those concerns has been shared by our leadership with Chatham-Kent Police Services with a request that there's action taken. I think there definitely needs to be some additional updates. I know that Chief Khan and Deputy Chief Early have approached the security company on a number of occasions. Unfortunately, the problems still continue. There's reports of security guards that are sleeping and not paying attention. And although I have not heard any specific concerns of looting, I think the concerns I had heard from a number of residents were they're concerned about the security of their property, given that they're not there to protect it. The expectation is that municipality and by extension, the Chatham-Kent Police Services will do so. So I think there definitely needs to be a follow-up with our Chatham-Kent Police Services to discuss the options for either providing more police support or perhaps revisiting who's providing the security services on site, because it certainly has been porous, to say the least, and concerns.
Councillor Harrigan, just to add to that, I fully expect that in very short order, we'll be hearing from the police services and exactly what they're plan on doing to rectify the situation. So I expect that very shortly.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely on the radar.
Great, thank you both.
Councillor Oche.
Thank you, Worship. Mine as well is about Wheatley. One of the things also about security guard. Do they have a job description of, like, when they're there, are they supposed to walk the beat, as they say? Like, that's one question I have, because a lot of people are asking that. And then the second one is towards Thomas Kelly, if I could. Thomas, I know you said the caseworkers will get a hold of everyone. People are wondering approximately when, because I know at the meeting we said by Friday, but then we had some changes that we were going to put in place after some of the comments at the meeting. So do we have an update on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have an update. And so we took the input from the residences on some of the changes they wanted to see, especially the one gentleman who spoke from the insurance companies. We met with him today, and we are developing a plan now that would incorporate a number of the ideas that he suggested. So when I mentioned Friday, we were ready to go after the meeting, but we made a number of changes which involve outside parties, the insurance companies, and then to have designated contractors. Our goal is to have designated contractors that all the insurance companies can share. So that's our goal right now. So it's taking a little longer. We are working closely with Community Human Services, and they will be contacted at this time. Until we get some of the details worked out, we won't be able to say, I can't say exactly when, but it will definitely be soon. We just need to get all of the details of this new plan worked out, and really a commitment. One of the things that we've said from the beginning, it needs to be safe. And we certainly didn't want 20 different insurance agents along with 20 different contractors entering the zone. For example, these contractors, we're prepared to give them training to know exactly how to handle in the event an emergency did occur. So we're trying to minimize that list and also get the cooperation from all the insurance companies. Ideally, we would have one company looking after water, one company looking after restoration. But that's where we're at now. It's going to take more time, unfortunately, but we're doing so because we believe it's a good idea what's been suggested. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Is there any, through you, your worship, can we give them like a week, like next week or the week after? Or obviously everybody's anxious to get back to their place to pick up stuff.
Yeah, I understand that. And what we need is some cooperation now from multiple groups now. And I don't have that at this time. So what I just described, there's training to take place. There's minimizing the amount of training so that we pick specific contractors who will do the work. Requires the cooperation of all the different insurance companies. I do not have that at this time. So I can't completely control the agenda at this time or the timing. So we are working on it though. And we're telling everyone, let's get this moving. And again, just to remind everyone, all of this takes place when there's no active work on site. So that active work, we're trying to, at the same time, simultaneously plan that and to get that done as quick as possible. So I understand the patience and I really appreciate the patience of the community. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a lack of communication to the people who believe they're getting a phone call within the next few days. So I would love an email sent out to either by the case workers or by us specifically to the people affected that are not in their houses right now, so that they are not sitting at home thinking, oh, we're going to get a call today or tomorrow, if it's going to be a week or two away. So if we could do that, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Shea. I think that's an excellent idea, and I'll take care of that tomorrow.
Great, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other non-agenda business, we'll move to resolution of council in closed session and adjournment. Councillor C. McGregor, and then if I can get Councillor Bondi to second that.
Thank you. And through the mayor, I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, November 15th, 2021, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, seconded.
All right. Anyone opposed to ending the meeting at 7:28 on Monday?
It's close.
Close? Okay. I haven't heard anybody, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks, everyone.